Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Lisa Brazelton here with Chris Noble, and we are with Wisdom from the Edge. We are so grateful that you're here with us. Thank you for all your viewing, your comments. It's really making a difference here with us, and it is absolutely motivating, like you couldn't believe. Um, Today, we are going to talk about meditation. Last week, we talked about prayer and what is prayer. And today, we're going to be talking about meditation. And we're going to go into some techniques in meditation. And we're also going to get a little geeky and talk about the neuroscience and some of the chemicals that run through our body and our brain when we do meditate. So, Chris, how you doing?
I'm great, Lisa. It's always amazing to be here, and it's awesome to see you. And of course, our wonderful audience.
Thank you.
Welcome to another episode of Wisdom from the Edge. I'm excited to talk about this meditation today and get into the nerdy stuff, which is always my favorite.
It's my favorite too. Well, so let's go back to, just to look at the etymology, okay, of meditation. What does it mean to meditate? Um, Obviously, the word meditate has been around for a long time, and um, the definition of meditation or meditate is to ponder, to think abstractly, to engage in mental contemplation. We understand that it's the contemplation, it's the concentration, it's the introspection, um, and I think that that all sounds great to a lot of people, but to those who haven't quite been able to like get themselves into a state that shifts who they are and and how they see themselves. And once we do it once, you never want to go back. So the root word, um, med, is to take appropriate measure, to plan in the mind, to employ the mind in thought or contemplation. And I find it to be, just this really, really interesting that, um, if we look at that and kind of, med is to think, right? There is the Latin, meditare is to think or reflect or consider. Um, when we look at meditare in a different way, and the spelling is actually a little bit different. It's to heal, to give medical attention, to cure. So I love that because I think, just based on my experience, that meditation is the ability to shift, to cure our mind of the trappings that we have become programmed to believe. It's the release, it's the cure of through thoughtless thought, right? I'm kind of just playing a little bit more poetically right now, but just from my own experiences, that meditation so much is the ability to tune out in order to heal within. What, just based on what I just said, Chris, like, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's funny, something as simple as med from medicine and meditation, I actually never put those two together until right now. And well, that makes so much sense, right? And it's almost like meditation is medicine for the brain or the mind, because our minds are beautiful, wonderful machines, and in this current day and age, they are running on complete overdrive, right? And we a lot of the time are taught that it's all the mind and you got to think your way through everything and ponder your way through life. And of course, we know that there's so much more for our guidance systems, like our heart and intuition as an example of other ways that we can quote unquote think. So we use our mind far too much now. It's on overload. It's on absolute overdrive. And when we meditate, it just helps bring that engine that's like revving at way too high of an RPM. It's like it brings it down to that like smooth purring like a kitten kind of engine sound maybe, and just allows your mind to settle a bit more, because when we're our minds are just bouncing around constantly. And I'm very guilty of this. This is why I meditate and do everything else that I do, because my mind is just go, go, go. And it just helps like bring that silence. And when your mind can actually have some silence and not think, then oh my God, not only is it just so peaceful and so restorative, but then that's where the ideas come in. That's where your creativity can come in. And that's where it's oddly more productive if you're going to look at like, oh, I have such a busy day. How am I going to squeeze in time for meditation? Well, you can reframe meditation to look at that is enhancing your productivity. When you take that 5, 10, 15, 20-minute break, maybe multiple times in your day or just once, either way, that will help bring that silence and that space into your mind to then allow new thoughts and new creative things to come in. So yeah, I mean, let's dive into it. But I love the etymology of that. I never realized that it really is medicine in a sense, right?
It is medicine, absolutely. Um, we're going to talk about another breathing technique that should be really helpful. Last week, we dove a bit into the works of Paramahansa Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship, and everything that he did when he came to the Western world was to really teach Kriya Yoga. And Kriya Yoga is a breathing technique or a technology, a way in which um, to bring the antenna of ourself in connection with God. And so just as a regular way to get into a meditative state, we're going to go through of the posture, where to rest your eyes when you meditate, what your breathing should be like, and where you should be sitting, that kind of thing. So we'll go into the weeds a little bit with that. But you brought up something very interesting, and I took some notes here. That and I would this is where I kind of geek out, and I want to dive into the aspects of how do we prime the mind and actually prime the body to get ourselves into a meditation or a state of meditation so that we not only feel a sense of calm, and we've said this a lot on this channel, is that meditation, the very first stage of meditation, is to be in a greater sense of calm. It is both that physical sense, it's the mental sense, but it's also the physiological. How do we get back into a stasis? But different phases or stages, the more advanced stages, I guess, of meditation is really what I'm interested in, because I want to know, how do we get to a gamma state, right? And we're going to talk about that in just a second, about what that really means. But I'm interested in finding out, how do we prime the body first? And for me to understand how to prime the body and the mind, I need to understand the intricacies of what happens with our body, what happens with our brain, what are the chemicals that come through, and what are the different states, resting states that our body actually goes through. So I'm going to just like dive right in here and talk about this. So um, most people ask me, like, when is the best time to meditate? And I'm going to say, undoubtedly, the best time to meditate is in the morning before you do anything. But it also is really great to do at night, in the evening. The brain goes from a deep delta brainwave to theta to alpha to beta from our night to our morning. Is that correct, Chris? Like beta is our awakened state.
Yeah. Beta alpha is just getting out of sleepiness into alertness, which is a great meditative state,
Okay.
but beta is more awake.
Okay. So I'm always asking the question of why. What is that all about? What are these different states of brain waves that we experience? And when we go to bed, we go from beta to alpha to theta to delta, and it's reversed when we wake up. The morning turns on this kind of high beta, and it's almost like driving a sports car in first gear. The first thing that happens when we open our eyes is we see light. And our light then activates our optic nerve, which sends signals to the pineal gland. And the pineal gland then starts to make serotonin. Serotonin is the daytime neurotransmitter. It gets us up and going during the day, right? I mean, that's like how we feel like, okay, I'm energized, I'm ready to get up. And that's what happens when we open our eyes. But the nighttime is almost the opposite. It changes because we have less light to the optic nerve, and then it sends different signals to the pineal gland, and it takes serotonin, and it actually takes the pieces, like some pieces within the serotonin, and it turns it almost alchemically into melatonin. Now, there's scientific ways in which that happens, and we're not going to go into that, but this is where, when we get tired, right, this is where melatonin actually kicks in, which is, again, that's our nighttime neurotransmitter. So serotonin gets you up, and melatonin helps you go to sleep. When serotonin increases the brain waves, it goes into beta, which is our awakened state, and it helps us pay attention to our outer world. So where does meditation come in with all of this? Well, meditation happens when we shut our eyes and get into a relaxed state, and we desensitize our serotonin, where we are forgetting our outer world and going into an inner world. Meditation brainwaves move into melatonin. But if you're waking in the morning, okay, I mean, like if you're waking in the morning and say it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, the brain waves will be in theta or alpha, which is your subconscious, which is one of the reasons why getting into a meditative state in the morning is really great, because you have to do actually less work. Early in the morning is the best time to create, because the rest of the day, what are we doing? We are like on high beta waves. Like we're thinking, we're not thinking, we're doing. And between a beta and an alpha, there is the possibility to slip into a theta brainwave, which is the key to a deeper state of meditation. And it's when the body is asleep, but the mind is awake. And this is where creative genius comes in. When the body no longer feels it's the mind, it no longer resists. And when that happens, things change instantaneously. And when we talk about, instantaneous manifestations, that's what we're talking about here. Now, some people say you shouldn't go to sleep, you shouldn't meditate in bed, because you're more likely in the morning, if you're laying down, to actually go back into a delta phase. And when you slip back into that delta, you're missing the whole thing that happens with the brainstem, which we'll get into in just a second. But when you're in alpha and you shift into theta and the body gets relaxed, the sympathetic nervous system actually switches on. And then it's able to balance the parasympathetic nervous system. And what happens when you're in that thetic state and your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system kind of go into harmony? It explodes and hits the brain cells, which switch the filament gate. Filament gate. And all energy hits that area, which is the brain stem back here. And again, what's in the brainstem area? It's your vagus nerve. And what happens there is that your gamma brain waves, which are your super conscious brain waves, start to get activated. And I have had this happen before. And it's a moment that you can't forget, because it's a little different than just being in a meditative state. When you are in a gamma state, you literally are living the experiences that in your inner world that are so profound in the moment that you think it's real. So high gamma changes everything. And that is the energy and the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems being basically in harmony. And the filament gate is then open, and the subconscious is out of the way. It's in the back seat. It's in the back seat with the seatbelt on while you, as soul, are driving the vehicle. And you then become a person that is so aware of the thinking brain, and you're able to shut it off in a different way than the monkey mind brain that is on incessant, thoughts and feelings and feelings and thoughts and thoughts and feelings. It's almost as if you can use it, it's like a dimmer switch that you then have the control to dim it down to say 10 to 1,000, right? How bright do you want it to be? So the last thing that I want to say about this, Chris, and then I really would love to open this up because it's so fascinating to me to understand the neuroscience behind meditation. When we are in a gammic state, our brain is basically having an orgasm. The brain is on fire, but it is not chemical, it's electromagnetic. And the moment that that happens, melatonin changes. And the melatonin is transmuted into an alchemical factory that shoots right to our pineal gland. And it makes different chemicals that actually help with antioxidants, anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart, disease, everything floating. And then it gets floated, it starts to float within the bloodstream. And the brain continues to change these melatonin molecules, and it creates a phytoluminescent chemical that is it's the same chemical that's found in electric eels. And neurons are exploding with heightened energy. When people talk about meditation, once you get yourself into a state and you are committed and you have an experience like this, you will never be the same. You will ultimately change the fabric of your constellation of who you are. And the one thing that I'll say, and then I would love to get your feedback on this, Chris, is that there's something that's so magical that happens when we're sitting and working through, breathing again through meditation, and you feel like you're calm and everything is good, and then you want to get out of it. Like, okay, I think I've had enough. Maybe it's been 30 minutes. I invite you to actually go another 5 minutes. It's when the ego is ready to resist it the most, when we need to take a deep breath and go deeper and deeper and deeper. And when we do that, that is where you're going to get these explosive, neurological orgasms, basically, that are creating the chemicals. They're changing the chemicals in your body to become a new, as Joe Dispenza says, a new superhuman. So I believe so much in meditation, not just to have it for de-stressing, but to get into that state that makes me become internally superhuman. What do you think, Chris? Pretty awesome, right?
Oh yeah, I love it. I'm actually really curious if you could maybe give me a bit more of your story with this gamma when you had the gamma state that you're in. Like what was that like for you?
Well, I've had it
Or
multiple times.
one of the times or whatever.
Okay, so the first time that it happened to me, and just to let the viewer know, when I started meditating, probably now 25 years ago, I was meditating for hours at a time, hours. And the first hour was the breathing, getting myself into a state where I felt like I was able to let go. Because I did all of that work before in the past, I'm now able to get into a meditative state within about 15, 20 minutes. So, you know, and I'm sure that I could do it if I practiced more. But I remember one of my first experiences is literally having the experience of having wings on my back and feeling the presence of all kinds of and like very angelic presence around me, you know, star light, star families, galactic families, like everything that is not in our physical reality. I literally felt like I was seeing them as like almost a veil over them. I mean, it was just the most beautiful and benevolent feeling of feeling protected and feeling just loved. And I felt literally wings on my back. And I'm sitting, I was sitting up in a chair, sitting in a chair. And I felt that the wings were starting to open up. And I can't explain it, but it was so profound to me. I still remember what I was wearing, where I was exactly in the room of my old home, what the color of the fabric was on the chair. I mean, this is such a long time ago. I don't even remember what I ate last week, but I remember that so well. And, the feeling of being so grateful and happy and so loved. I remember waking out of it and I was just bawling. And I didn't even know that I was. But this feeling of having these angelic wings, it was almost as if I was given my angelic wings at that time. So that is one of my earliest experiences with
An
that.
initiation or something.
Right.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, and
Mhm.
for the audience watching and listening, this is an individual experience. Everyone experiences meditation a little differently and
Right.
uniquely. So I love hearing everyone's stories of like, their favorite meditation experiences as an example, because they're always different. That's why I was curious to hear yours because everyone has their own particular version or experience of meditation. So that's another thing that took me a little while when I was first learning to meditate too. I'm like, don't, again, we're one of the best things we can do in general is to drop comparison. Comparison's helpful, I mean, analytically and stuff, but for the most part, it doesn't do us much good because you're comparing things that actually shouldn't even be compared half the time or most of the time. And this is definitely one of those areas. Don't compare yourself to other meditators because everyone has a different experience. So when I first learned, I remember I studied transcendental meditation. I was at the time still pretty skeptical to meditation, but I was very open at the same time because nothing else was working and I had really bad insomnia. So I was, it's good, right? When we get these issues, they're a blessing most of the time because they force stubborn humans like myself to go down these paths and these more alternative, modalities that we may have been more closed-minded to in the past. So I'm grateful for my insomnia at the time because yeah, it got me to go to transcendental meditation. I liked it because it had the most science and studies and data behind why it all worked. And I remember after the first month of my training, I went back and I was just like to my instructor, I don't think it's working. I don't feel anything that profound, like what you described, Lisa. I'm like, I didn't have wings growing out of my back. I'm not having out of body experiences. Like, where's the magic, man? Where's this like meditation, epiphany, orgasmic experience? Like that's not happening. So what's going on? What am I doing? I must be doing something wrong, right? I must be doing something wrong. And so he's, a very wise, experienced gentleman, and he's just kind of smiled. And he's like, okay, let's just tell me what your life's been like over the last month, So I start to tell him, and then I start to talk about my sleep, and I was just like, yeah, like, he's like, what's your bedtime routine? I'm like, yeah, I told him, and then I'm like, yeah, and then I fall asleep, and then I wake up, and then I stopped myself. I was like, oh my God, yeah, I'm falling asleep. Like that's the profound realization I was having, or that was my profound meditation moment, was that I actually had no idea that it was already helping me. And I had basically within that first month gotten rid of my insomnia, and I didn't even know it. I was so unaware that I was actually being able to sleep properly
Isn't
again,
that funny? Yeah.
right? And he just smiled. He's like, we don't notice what's normal. Our bodies, when they can come back into like a normal stasis, which they most of the time aren't. We're always in fight or flight, right? Like day to day, we're most of us, our bodies are reacting like it's being chased by a grizzly bear, just because of our stressful and anxiety provoking environments that we're in. And I didn't realize that in that month of learning meditation, I had already learned how to sleep properly again. And my body I didn't even recognize it. I was trying to think of all these grandiose, experiences, when in fact, the whole reason I went was already being done for me. I was sleeping again. And so that's
Yeah.
another
They're
thing.
subtle. That's the
It's
thing,
subtle.
is that
Yeah.
it's
Very subtle.
meditation. And I'm just going to say, as a little disclaimer here, when I was at that phase where I was meditating for multiple hours at a time, I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I meditated until 8. That was my routine. And I did that for months upon months upon months before I had this, I'll use the word transcendental. Not that I've ever done transcendental meditation. I learned from different um, places and different practices, but it's subtle. Like let the subtleness like consume you, right? I mean, Chris, it's an amazing story that didn't know that you were sleeping better until it was brought to your attention. And I'm telling you, this is what meditation does. And, it's like maybe you decide, instead of having French fries every day, you decided to have a salad, or, eat some fresh vegetables, and you don't really notice it until, you look on the scale and you're like, oh, well, I guess I have actually changed some of my habits. Well, I mean, it may be a little trivial of that experience, but it's the subtlety that creates the profundity over time.
Well, because we're not tuned into subtle energies or anything
Right,
subtle anymore. It has to be so in your face and dramatic, because that's again our conditioning in society. It's very like in your
right,
face, like
right, 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 right,
bam,
right,
like
right, right, right.
pay attention, and that's always the energy of everything in our physical world right now. So that's why it's extra challenging for a lot of people for meditation, because meditation's all about the subtle. It's about the whispers that the universe will give you in those quiet moments, which we rarely have. And that's why meditation is so great and profound, is that it creates those moments of needed and much needed silence and rest, and just that peace, right? And that's the thing, right? It's maybe not as romantic or sexy for the day-to-day person, right? Where they're like, but I want my quick fix, magic bullet solution. And the funniest thing is it is kind of a magic bullet solution, but it's just not, it doesn't display it in the most obvious of ways, because the second I started to meditate, I was starting to sleep again. So that's a magic bullet. I mean, that was pretty much instantaneous, but I didn't even notice it because it was subtle. So it's a
That's
funny
so, but
contradiction.
it is a funny contradiction, but that's part of the paradox of meditation, I think, to begin with. Um, I would love for us to um, I'd love to hear how you get yourself into, what is the stages? How do you prime your body and your mind before you actually are in a meditative state?
Yeah, this is also an individual thing. So for our wonderful audience, just see what resonates for you, and take what things are going to work for you best, because it's a personal practice, right? So
Mhm.
for me, especially maybe in the last year or so. I have to include breath and some form of breath work into my meditation because it is absolutely for me essential to slow the mind and to prep my body for a more relaxive state. I've been finding, although my morning meditations are always lovely, if I do a second meditation, which I typically do after like a yoga flow, after my quote unquote exercise, I'll meditate for 10, 15 minutes after that, like when you're in Vipassana, when you're lying down, or corpse pose, as they say as well, and you're just lying down after exercise. I find I can really go deep after physically moving and working my body through yoga or through dance or through something like that. So when I combine the movement and the breath, so I've been finding my morning meditations are lovely, but in the afternoon when I do my breath work and my yoga, I really drop really deeply into a meditation after that, and quick. It's quite quick after, because it's like when you're doing something like yoga, it is also already a form of meditation. So you're kind of already priming for like 20 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour your body to get into that state. And then when you do it, it's like boom, you can really fall into it. So that's been helping me more recently. How about you, Lisa?
Yeah, that's great. I think I have evolved over time. Um, my routine in the morning is a little different than it used to be. When I first started meditating, I literally would sit up in bed and just sit in bed and then close my eyes. I was still completely sleepy, but I was awake enough to know that my body was not, going and slipping back into delta. And I could sit there for an hour easily. And that was the easiest way for me to kind of get into meditation. I was still kind of remembering a dream state. I've been like really focused on my breath and getting into a rhythm of breath before I let go. Today, my meditation practices are a little different. I have a different morning routine. I would say probably over the last like 5 or 6 years, I do like to get up, brush my teeth. I'm a big fan of that. And then I will go to a chair that I have as my kind of my meditation chair, and I will have my tea, and I will sip on my tea and look out the window, and I will contemplate. And once I have that, and that's probably for about 15 minutes, and then I get myself into a comfortable state of meditation. And the way that I do that again is I go through a qigong breathing technique where I am forcing myself to deeply breathe in, holding that breath, and then releasing that breath. And it's a practice. And while I'm doing that and breathing that deeply, the deep breath in, holding my breath at the top, releasing it, I am squeezing those intrinsic muscles, which are the sex organs, and you squeeze that at the bottom, at the top of the breath. So when I breathe in all the way up to the top of my head and hold it, I squeeze, and then I release when I exhale my breath. And then I also, and I know this sounds like a lot of stuff to do, but this is, again, as Chris said, you'll come up with your own practice if you haven't already, and just like tweak and, what works for you, because we're all individual. At the same time, I am very clear about all of the 7 or 9 chakras that are within our physical, close proximity to our physical form. And I open those up like um, a lotus petal. So I feel the crown, and I'm very, specific during the breath, and then I let that open. And then I feel the third eye, and I take some breaths and I wait for that to fully open. And then the throat. And so when all of those are aligned, and sometimes that takes 30 minutes, sometimes it takes 5 minutes, but I give myself enough time. And in about an hour is the typical amount of time. Once I am in that, then I just breathe without effort. I have my eyes closed. I'm sitting up. My back is resting lightly against a chair. Sometimes people sit up, but I always uncross my legs. I keep my hands, my palms faced upward that are resting comfortably on my thighs. My eyes are closed, but they're not shut. They're just closed mostly. And then I lift my gaze up, not to strain your eyes, not to cross your eyes, but I lift my gaze up to meet right in between the eyebrows. So if my eyes are mostly closed, and then I just gently lift my eyes that in between my eyebrows. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel a strain. And again, when you start to practice that, you're going to notice that your third eye is going to start to pulsate. This point in between here, which again directly behind it is your pineal gland, and it's just going to start to kind of pulsate. And sometimes that pulsation can be so profound that your whole face feels like it's pulsating, right? And maybe the crown and that whole area feels like it's pulsating. But you can't get it wrong. And whatever works for you. But these are, really intricate steps of the how to, which we know that our audience has asked.
And also,
Of, yeah.
there's like for the beginners out there that are just getting into this, you can start with guided meditations too. Like there's so many guided meditations, of course, for free on YouTube. Find some that resonate with you. There's ones for anything. You can get specific with the theme of your meditation, if it's for abundance or bringing romantic love into your life or whatever you want. You can likely find a guided meditation that also probably is going to have some frequencies and some soundscapes that also can help get you into that state of consciousness. And I can quickly touch on
Yeah,
some.
Chris, I mean, this is your area. So if you could, because what I didn't say is that I'm always listening to sound on my earbuds. And depending on that frequency, and sometimes I do listen to guided meditation, and we can talk about that a little bit. But the sound is so important. So listen up to this.
Yeah, so it's really one of the easiest ways that we can start to meditate is to use sound as a tool and as like in a way kind of like training wheels, but also training wheels that you can leave on forever and they're not going to constrict you, even though silent meditation's of course important and wonderful as well. But having frequencies and beautiful soundscapes, music, whatever, to accompany you is great, and for so many different reasons. So one of the things you can start to think about and look for when you're meditating is types of music and frequencies that will get you into those states of consciousness that you're looking for. So as an example, if you're starting the day with a meditation, you're likely wanting to wake your body up, right? I mean, you still want to meditate and get into that deep place, but eventually the whole point is to bring yourself into the day, to have energy to do what you need to do. So you can listen to frequencies that are maybe in the alpha range where they're still meditative and they're still contemplative and they're in between that asleep and awake state of consciousness, but it is bringing you into the alertness. And you can look on YouTube as an example. You
What
can,
is that though exactly? I mean, can you give us a number range? What is that?
yeah, I always I forget to be honest, the specific frequencies for alpha. I'll pull that up in a second and I'll let people know. But basically, these are but we're getting into the realm of binaural beats essentially,
Mhm.
and we've got your deepest state, which is the delta state of consciousness, which is I think 0.5 hertz to about 4 hertz roughly, and that's you are unconscious, out deep sleep. That's that state of consciousness. So then, if you're looking to have a deep sleep, maybe listening to a delta wave binaural beat might be helpful. Or you could go one up into theta. And theta is still very deep, but it's getting more into the alert stage. Okay. So maybe that might work better for you. Or you want to go to that next stage, which is the alpha stage. Okay, so alpha's now we're alert, we're awake, but we're still in that like you're kind of lying in bed state, right? You're just waking up. You're still very in and out of the dream state. Okay, but maybe we want to move beyond alpha. Then we get to beta. So then beta is okay. Now we're awake. I mean, you were talking about that earlier, Lisa. It's like beta is now like we're awake. We're doing things. That's a great frequency to listen to. Certainly during a meditation, but also you can listen to while you do work because it actually helps with productivity and things like that, concentration, focus, and then of course
Yeah, I
there's
was going to
gamma.
say concentration. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then there's gamma wave, which is even higher. That gets upwards to about 40 hertz and even above, actually up to 100 hertz. And that's like when you're, let's say, use an example as an athlete and you're about to play a sport, and you are playing a sport and you're hyper concentrated and you're physically like go, 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 go. And your body's pretty much operating at its like peak state, let's say. That's the gamma wave state. So to bring it all back, if you want, watching, listening audience, you can type in to Google brainwave frequencies, and that's what will come down is these, delta, theta, beta, alpha, gamma, and you can look at what they represent, what they mean, because I find is when you do your own research this way, this will also help distill it into your mind, and
Hmm.
then that can
Hmm.
help you search for the appropriate binaural beat that you ultimately want to find. And then those binaural beats, when you listen with headphones, which is very important too, listening to binaural beats with headphones, it will literally send different frequencies into each of your ear that creates an interference pattern that actually just like actually formulates or shifts your brain, your consciousness into that given state of consciousness. So it like the frequency kind of does the work for you. So going back, let's say we're listening to an alpha wave and you're already kind of getting the monkey mind going. You put on your alpha wave frequencies, it's going to bring you back into that calm state without you really having to do anything anymore. Now we can still do the breath and do these other things, but now that you're listening to these frequencies, it really is like the training wheels. Like you can't, it's gonna work. Trust me. I mean, these binaural beats are powerful, and they really do bring you into that state of consciousness. So you can start to use that to your advantage when you meditate. And then there's other things too. You can search for just soothing music might be really helpful. Maybe you don't need the binaural beats. Maybe you need nature sounds, like the sound of running water in a creek or birds. So again, this is going to come down to you, the individual. What do you need that's going to help get you into that state? But using sound of some kind, whether it's soothing music, maybe it's like a really ambient piano or guitar that just seems to bring you into that state. Maybe it's these nature sounds I was describing, the sound of water, you know, things like that, wind, soft wind on the leaves, what makes you get into your relaxed state? Because sounds are so powerful. And once you start to just experiment and go and you listen to different ones, and all of a sudden, I mean, you are the test, you're the litmus test, right? When you play that sound, how does your body react? Does it go, like you kind of sigh and your body can relax immediately? That's probably going to be the sign that your body's giving you that that's the right sound to listen to.
No, that's great. It's so helpful. What I will say is that when I was starting to meditate those many, many, many years ago, there was no sound. I mean, I didn't have anything like that, or I didn't have access to it. I didn't even knew it existed. And so now I use binaural beats to accelerate my state of meditation quicker. And it's like the shortcut. It's the quick button, if there is one. It doesn't bypass meditation, but it just allows us to get into a quicker state. Can you explain, Chris, what the different hertz sounds are? So, for example, you do most of your work, I think you do in 432 hertz. Is that correct? Can you explain why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much about sound, right? So with 432 hertz, that is the love frequency. 432 hertz has been measured many ways and in many cultures throughout time, actually, to be this frequency of love. It seems to be a fundamental frequency of the planet as well. And even the ancients would design a lot of their temples and pyramids specifically to resonate at the frequency of 432 hertz. So there's something going on, and I've found anecdotally that that frequency really provided relaxation almost immediately to me every time I hear anything tuned to that frequency. And so the difference with tuning instruments to a frequency of 432 hertz versus binaural beats is the 432 hertz tuning is really what's affecting the instruments in the music. So 432 hertz is going to be more associated with music. So you're listening to meditation music that's tuned to that frequency. And you can also listen to meditations that just have that frequency of 432 hertz. And there's going to be different things that you get, but essentially it's a love frequency. And to come back to what does 432 hertz tuning mean, it essentially means that you're taking the home frequency. So every instrument, when you watch a symphony, let's say, or even if you haven't gone to one, we all kind of know like that iconic sound of the symphony warming up before they start, right? It's used in movies and we've all seen that, right? They're all tuning and it all
Mhm.
kind of sounds like that classic orchestra pit tuning sound. What they're doing is they've chosen one frequency to tune all of their instruments to that one frequency. And so they pick one note, in this case, it's the note is A, the A note, and they all decide that that A note is going to have the frequency of 440 hertz, because that's what standard tuning is. They just decided in the 1950s, we're going to standardize tuning to a specific frequency, okay? So when everyone's tuning that one home note, they're going to tune it to 440 hertz. So 432 hertz tuning, all I'm doing is shifting it from 440 just a little bit down to 432 hertz. And when we do that, we shift that home frequency. It of course affects all the other notes in the whole scale, right? And when it does that, it just means these notes are now resonating at a different frequency. And it just so happens that that frequency is very mathematically beautiful and divine. And a lot the number 9 comes up a lot with 432 hertz, and you've got a lot of sacred geometrical shapes that resonate at these frequencies that are multiples or divisions of 432 hertz. And all of a sudden, when you vibrate things with these frequencies, the vibrations do form very symmetrical, very beautiful patterns. And so you can just extrapolate that and imagine your body resonating in these same kind of harmonious, symmetrical, geometric patterns. That's the cells in your body. That's your DNA. That's the water. That's all of it's your blood. It's everything that makes up your body is now resonating at these more, let's say, divine frequencies, or these more healing frequencies that are just vibrating everything in a more symmetrical, harmonious way. So that's pretty positive, I would say, that we want
Yeah,
that usually. And I would say, once again, taking out of the science for a second, anecdotally, I've been doing this for the last 5 years or so, tuning my music all the time to that same home base frequency. And it always seems to just get these comments of like, oh, I just feel good. I just feel better. It's always just seems to have a subtle but very profound effect on the human body, mind, and of course the emotions. So that's really why
that's
I do
that's
that.
amazing. No, I mean, Chris, why don't you say what your website is? Because this Chris's music is absolutely wonderful and it is very diverse. So, what's your website, Chris?
Yeah, it's chrisnoblemusic.com, and we can put that in the show notes as well. My
Absolutely,
YouTube
absolutely.
channel is the best place to get all the meditation music. That will start to go more on Spotify, but the YouTube channel is the best place to start. One of my pieces, for anyone that's looking maybe for sleep as an example, it was a funny thing. I had a side effect for one of my pieces that just so happened to knock you out and put you to sleep. Was not my main intention, but it's my most popular song, and it's also using 40 hertz. Side note, little tangent here, but 40 hertz. I looked up. There was some really great research back at the University of Toronto where they did research with Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's, and using 40 hertz to try to stop the deterioration of the mind. And they
Mm.
found that it actually worked in small test subjects or studies, but it still had a profound effect on halting, stopping the brain from deteriorating any more than it already was. And so I actually wrote this piece for my grandfather at the time to help him with his Parkinson's. And although I think it still does have a positive effect neurologically, and I have had lots of comments on the video that have said specifically, like, I played this for my mom with Alzheimer's and it seemed to do something positively with her. But the funniest thing is that by far, it's the comments and everyone that's experienced it. They're like, "This just knocks me out. I go to sleep like immediately." So it's kind of funny to see also sometimes what the quote unquote side effects are. They're healthy side effects, FYI. And see what happens there. So anyway, we'll put that in the description. You guys can check
No,
it
let's
out.
do it. That's wonderful. Chris's music is amazing. There are many reasons why Chris is my co-host. He comes with a wealth of information. He is dedicated to changing the constellation of humanity and raising the consciousness, and that's what we're all here. You know, we are here at Wisdom from the Edge to make that profound shift, and you can do the same. And one of the most important pieces of information that was shared with me that I keep with me, like um, as if it were a stone, like a philosopher's stone or something, is so sacred. And this piece of information is that we are not here to be the one savior for humanity. We are here in coming in communion with, in union with, to commune with others. And together we collectively are changing and shifting, but it must come from within. So, as much as you know, both Chris and I have such a deep passion for making a difference in the world, if we are not first working on ourselves, we cannot then illuminate our own electromagnetic frequency to have that be a part of the positive shift. And so that's why we're here. We're here to help you and to assist and give you just, you know, even if it was just one little nugget of an aha, and you can share that with someone, we've done it. We've did what we wanted to do. So thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing. Um, and I am excited to talk with you next time that we meet, because we are going to talk about, well, now that we've talked about prayer and we've talked about meditation, what are the commonalities and what are the differences between the two? And then how do we bring those into congruency? And are there even differences? Or does one come before the other? All of this we're going to be talking about in our next episode. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Lisa. It's always a pleasure. And just remember, everybody, when you change yourself, you change the world. So you don't have to worry about that external world. Just worry about you. Just put that time and focus into yourself. So, yeah, let us know in the comments if you guys have had any profound experiences or realizations or any other tips and tricks for our audience. Because as we share, as Lisa said so poetically, it is about communion, it's about collaboration and community. And that's how we can all help each other out to learn and to grow together. And so the comments are a great way to do that. So let us know on whatever platform you're listening or watching this to. Give us a little like and let us know how have you been doing with your meditation practice and what have you found that helps you. Is that sharing that knowledge is important. So thanks everybody for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Otherwise, thank you, Lisa. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to the next episode. So
I do too.
stay tuned,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Take care. Namaste. Bye bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Wisdom from the Edge. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And make sure, if you haven't already, to follow, like, and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. It actually helps us out quite a lot in growing this platform. And also leave us a comment if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts about what you enjoyed on this episode and things that you want to offer, maybe ideas for a new episode or things that you want to hear more about. Also, make sure to check out our website, wisdomfromtheedge.org. All that is in the description below. And you can learn more about what we do, what offerings we have, and of course, the courses and programs. There's lots to learn from, a lot of really cool resources to check out to enhance your everyday life. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wisdom from the Edge.